Welcome to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. Real conversations with entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders who refuse to settle. This isn't about overnight success. It's about the decisions, discipline, setbacks, and standards that shape extraordinary results. If you're building something that matters, you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. Today I am over the moon to have our guest here, Elizabeth Mahusay. Yes! She's the owner and founder. Yes, I'm so excited. She's the owner and founder of Go with Elizabeth and the author of Pick Your Path, a book I enjoyed tremendously. It was so helpful, such a great read. So welcome to Relentless Pursuit, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. And didn't you write a testimonial for the book?
I did because it's so good.
An
early plug, you can get it on Amazon, right? And you can get it on your website, which we'll have in the show notes. Talk me through what inspired you, because I also know you have another book coming out.
Yes.
So you were just telling me before the show started, this is more about your mindset, the one that I have, the blue Pick Your Path, and the red Pick Your Path is more about leadership. Talk me through what inspired you to bring these books to the world. How did that process come to be?
So what I've been learning about myself is from a standpoint of inspiration is I'm an overachiever. And I have spent a really good chunk of my life dealing with my self-reliance. And so part of my journey has been, how do I disrupt my thinking that I drop into as an overachiever to break the cycle of self-reliance and cultivate thinking that matters? And so specifically, as I've been deep diving in, what is my messaging? Really, all of the books that I have had published all center around thinking and how can we cultivate better thinking. And so Pick Your Path is literally designed, so the blue one that you held up, 21 days to set your mental autopilot on the right course, is around picking a better path of thinking. And then the red just continues that so that the reader can pick a better path of thinking specifically related to leadership. So it really is based on the fact that I am an overachiever who, if I'm not mindful, I drop into self-reliance. And the only way to break that cycle is to disrupt the thinking and cultivate thinking that matters.
I love that. And elaborate on overachiever self-reliance. What challenges do people tend to experience when have you had those challenges really impact you?
Oh my goodness. I mean, like, where to start? So overachieving, meaning that it's never enough, right? You achieve, it's the next thing. You achieve, it's what's next, what's next, what's next. It doesn't matter how much you achieve. An overachiever is always looking to achieve the next thing. And what happens is, because as an overachiever myself, that I'm always looking for that next thing, the self-reliance piece is you can dupe yourself into believing that I can't ask for help, or they won't be able to do it in the way that it needs to be done for me to, quote, achieve what I desire to achieve. So I just begin to rely on my own self, on my own strength. And the reality is that all of us need other people to ultimately achieve what matters. So that is a core difference when I think about overachievement. Keeps you in this, and especially when you're self-reliant, it's about what you can do, about being able to say, look at me, what have I done? But that in and of itself can leave you very empty, very hollow, very burnt out, and also very disconnected from your world, not only just from the world at large, but also relationally disconnected within the world.
I've been digging in a lot lately on burnout, because obviously we're both in the coaching space and we come across people, and I went through a very significant season of burnout, and really what are the roots of burnout. And I love your connection with overachieving, how that plays in, because ultimately the way I've always phrased it since I had this epiphany was that burnout is often trying to control things we can't and not controlling enough of the things we can. And what I mean by that, an overachiever might hear, okay, that just means I have to do everything. But the reality, what you're really saying is that overachiever needs to start when to prevent burnout, they need to see what actually can I offload? Who else can I rely on? How can I be comfortable not being everything to everybody? So are you seeing some of that as well?
Hands down. The fact that whether it's an owner or a founder, an executive, it is easy to convince oneself that if it's going to be, it's up to me, which is actually a very common statement that's often made as though it should be a badge of, I am that good. Look at me, I am that good. In reality, though, again, it creates that disconnected space for us. And where I'm working with people that have achieved the success. They're making the money. And they get to that space in their life where they're like, why am I doing this? Like, do I really want to make more money? Like, do I want to live my life this way? Is this worth it? Like, they start having all of these really existential questions. And to me, I think midlife crises often is more likely for an overachiever, just for different reasons, because they start questioning all the things that I've done to get here. Is this how I really want to live the rest of my life?
100%. What's interesting about that statement, because I've actually found it helpful when it comes to things related to ownership, right? Sort of taking ownership for not making excuses. But what I really hear you saying is, in the wrong hands, in the wrong context, it can actually go too far to where we're not just taking ownership, we're actually keeping other people from having any ownership. We're keeping other people from their growth, from their contribution, we're not scaling our business anymore because I'm the only person that can make it work, and these people aren't dependable because every email has to go through me, every decision has to go through me. And so what I really love that you just opened my eyes to is the dichotomy of something that could actually have really strong positive connotations can always be misused and abused in a way that holds us back. So I find that really...
Yeah. Absolutely agree. And the one thing I do want to say for the person watching this that likely is thinking to themselves, but my overachievement is exactly what has allowed me to be successful, right? It's what's gotten me to where I am. I just want to say, I hear you and we see you. And I think that for most overachievers, they don't just drop into stiff arming everyone else, that's in their organization. It often is an over time occurrence that they're doing all the emails, or they're the ones, all the decisions have to rest with them. Even though they may be verbalizing that that's not the case, the reality is the team knows it is the case. They've just learned to adapt to that behavior of the leader.
Yes.
And
adapt and not and accept it and not push back at all.
And so to your point about what is the cost of that, even though you didn't use that phrase, but the cost of that is on both sides. The cost to the leader is whether it's burnout or disillusionment on why I have this business in the first place. But there's also a cost to the people that they lead, because they're not having the opportunity to fail forward, because they're not going to always get it right. When you and I both know, when a leader delegates, it's not always done exactly the way that the leader wants, because they've got to learn some things, the leader has to learn some things, and the person taking on the task has to learn some things. But we're we are denying people the opportunity to fail forward. That's the first thing. We're denying the opportunity for people to actually do something and be successful and gain confidence as a result of it, because we're too busy trying to control all of the factors where that's concerned.
What I'm really hearing from that, because to me, most simplified, leadership is impact, growth through others, impact. And what I'm really hearing is the cost of this can really be how your impact can be stifled.
Ooh, I love that.
When we're not allowing people to take the reins, to learn, to fail forward faster, to make mistakes, to carve their own path. I mean, yes, we all got to be, rowing in the same direction, but there is one of the things that I've been really looking into a lot lately is the word agency. How I think at the deepest levels, many of us humans, we really desire agency. We desire ownership. And when we lose that ownership, hopelessness sets in. And hopelessness is one of the things, and these are obviously extremes. We can lose a little bit of agency and still not feel hopeless and despondent, but that's the long term path of what happens when we lose agency, is we start sliding more towards hopelessness, and employee engagement goes down. People's energy goes down. People start quiet quitting. They're not as creative or problem solving in the workplace. And so you and I were talking about sort of some of the short term and some of the long term examples, but I love that you're seeing and helping people through, how to use your overachiever for good, instead of how to let those traits hold you and the people around you back.
Yes, it's my part of what I've been sharing when I'm with my networking community is, and just owning for myself, because I am chief offender of being an overachiever in that sense, is I'm just owning the space of being a thinking disruptor for the overachieving leader that is ready to break this cycle of self-reliance through the cultivation of thinking that matters. And because it also just, I was listening to you as you were talking about that. I just want to pause here and say that something that stood out to me about what you were saying is it's the overachieving leader that we're talking about right now. It's coming to that place of, how do I really want to be known? Right? Mm-hmm. What do I want to leave as a lasting legacy, for example? And that when you talked about this agency, this ownership, this impact, and how impact may be stifled, that the vision of the leader, I think, as success occurs, ideally it needs to shift to, how can I impact and help other people grow, learn, be better, have agency, have ownership in this, to have hope in a better tomorrow, for example. Those are significant shifts in the mind of a leader that assists them in showing up in a way that helps people grow.
I'm connecting a dot here that I don't know that I connected before, but so much of leadership, it starts with that overachiever, if it's meant to be, or if it's going to be, it's whatever your phrase was, it's
up to me. It's meant to be, it's up to me.
It starts with that. That's my ownership. But leadership is really about transferring that torch of ownership to others.
Yes.
Because if it stays just on my plate, that really isn't leadership. You might have a big team. You might have a fancy title. You might make a lot of money. Your company might look fantastic on paper, but that isn't leadership.
Yeah. Agreed.
And so it's getting others.
I love that. I love the phrase, transferring the torch of ownership. And to your point, the fact that leaders often fail here, especially very well established companies, this is why we see that they are not able to make it in the second generation.
Interesting.
Think about that.
Talk more about that.
So, especially when it's family owned and they're trying to transfer it within the family, so often the company ends up dying when they're trying to have this transfer of ownership because the founder, the original owner, held too tightly to the torch, and either were 5 steps ahead of everyone else, or there wasn't real leadership happening. So then, as they attempt to have a succession plan or passing the torch plan, to use that phrase, there's not clarity on what that looks like. The individual who now receives the torch has not had the opportunity to develop the very skills necessary to successfully lead the organization. And thus, the organization declines, oftentimes dies, or it gets sold off, and the original intent is no longer there because they did not successfully transfer the torch of ownership.
And that's not something you can do hey, I decided I'm finally ready to retire in 18 months. That actually is something that needed the past decade. It needed the past several years. The other thing I'm seeing that's different but somewhat related to this conversation is I'm seeing owners who, because they never grew other people, they now are unwilling to sell. They say they want to sell, but everything was so much theirs that my husband actually went through an experience with a business he was trying to buy where the owner had said, I want to sell this, but as Jason was working with him to transfer it, he was unwilling to release anything, control of anything. Yep. And so it's still that holding everything to me space, even though it's a different challenge that emerges from that. But we're seeing a silver tsunami of businesses with all these people who want to retire. And I'm hearing from multiple clients, friends, that it's not looking as pretty as it could because people didn't have the systems in place to transfer that torch, to pass that torch.
Yeah, that silver tsunami. I have not heard that, but I totally get that. Yeah. I'm chemically dependent, so my silvers are not showing so much, but it definitely, it's a huge challenge. It is a huge challenge. And so think about the impact of that, the lack of wealth transfer, for example. Because if a company is not able to be passed on, to be sold, for example, then, when that person who's got the silver hair is no longer here, the company dies. There's no more revenue being generated. There's no transfer of wealth. And that's a sad reality, I believe. And then what does that look like? What does that look like 10 years into the future? That's one of the reasons why I'm super passionate about the speaking into this leadership space, and really giving people the opportunity to think differently about how they show up as a leader.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you and your husband, Fred, shout out to Fred Schatz. You both have been serial entrepreneurs for quite a number of years. How did 25? That's incredible. Tell me how that journey started for you.
I believe it actually started when I was a child, believe it or not. My dad, to escape family drama, moved our family to North Florida from South Central Florida and became a commercial fisherman. About the most fishing that he had done was on Lake Okeechobee catching speckled perch, right? This is a whole different...
So it was a pivot. What I hear you say is it was a bit of a pivot.
Yeah, he went from working in for Florida Power and Light, so think corporate setting, to being self-employed, harvesting oysters and shrimp. and selling them wholesale.
Wow.
Okay. And so I was 5 when we moved, and until the time I was 15, or just before I was 15, we worked as a family, like every weekend, every holiday, every spring break. You just had this recognition that, we lived, don't work, don't eat. That was the entrepreneurial mindset. I watched it in action. And so while I didn't choose out of college, to be an entrepreneur, I got a chemistry degree and started teaching and loved it. But when it came time to raise what became 2 sons, our first son, I really wanted to have greater autonomy, greater flexibility, greater freedom to be engaged in his growing up. And that's where really the entrepreneurism truly started, was what is it going to take for me to be a work from home mom versus a working mom? And where I had that flexibility and freedom. And so
far before that was the standard. There's far more work from home. Positions post-COVID.
That's probably a good point for people who are watching this. Like, my boys are in their 20s, right? So this is a long time ago when people were not working from home. There wasn't this thing called remote. We didn't have cell phones. Good.
I don't even remember Zoom from when I worked.
There wasn't. Well, that's not true. They did have. I remember when I was getting my master's degree, that there was online learning, but it was, you didn't have the interactivity like what we're having right now, right?
Right. It's come a long way.
You were basically watching someone teach a lesson, So yes, long before there was ever this, what we know now as work from home, I went into direct sales. We started our Fred Shots photography business. Actually, even before that, we had a DJ business. So my husband was a DJ for multiple years, and
he had it kind of coursing through his veins as well.
Yes, but I will tell you, it was harder for him to move fully into entrepreneurship. So as the DJ, that was like a part-time on the side. He worked full-time, DJ part-time on the side. Then when I went into direct sales full-time, he was still working full-time and had the photography business part-time. So it was harder for him. I'm more take the risk. Let's do the thing. I'm definitely less risk averse than Fred. But after about 5 years of my being home full time and working from home, he finally was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to let it go and let's do it. And so in December of 2005, he put his notice in, and we've been full-time commission-based entrepreneurs ever since.
What challenges did you all experience in those early days, particularly either him deciding to also join you full-time entrepreneur, or even 2 full-time entrepreneurs as the co-breadwinners?
Yeah, the first that I would share is we're a married couple. We met in high school. So Fred and I have known each other, this month, 40 years. And we've been married 30 and a half of those 40 years. And so the first challenge that we faced was, how do we work together? It's one thing to be married. It's one thing to do things part-time, and have a full-time job. It's a totally different thing to run businesses together. And so one of the first challenges that we faced is we needed to understand what was the role we were each going to play in any business that we had. And
how did you do that? Please elaborate on that, because I actually think that is a bigger problem for family businesses, and particularly when they go from, what my husband will say, chuck in a truck, but now we're scaling a little, so maybe I need some office help, or maybe I need, so talk a little bit about how did you do that?
Yeah, that's actually, it's a great point, and it's why so many family-owned businesses struggle to scale, because they neglect to address what is it going to take for us to work effectively together? They spend more time fighting and arguing than they do growing. So, all right, so how we did it, first of all, we argued. So, I mean, in reality, we think very differently. We are completely, Fred and I are, so I want to paint the picture appropriately for people listening. We are completely opposite. I'm an ESTJ, he's an INFP, if you understand Myers-Briggs. I'm a global abstract thinker, he's a concrete sequential thinker. I'm a DI, he's an SC, if you know anything about DISC. Like, we are completely opposite. So we had to go through our fair share of disagreements. What we kept coming back to, so this is one principle that I would always say, is what is the end goal? The end goal is to help this business be successful, right? If that's your end goal, then at the end of the day, you go, what is it going to take for us to come to agreement on getting to that end goal, right? And that meant compromise. That meant having crucial conversations. That meant sometimes conversations that were uncomfortable to have, and also going through the fights that ensue. I mean, I could tell you so many stories of my get it done, and Fred's like, we need to do this, and I'm like, but, and he's like, we need to do this, but this amount of money, this amount of time. And so eventually Fred, on one particular case on a computer issue, he just stopped saying anything until my computer didn't work at all. Right? And then I had no choice. Like, I had to yield to what Fred had already said. If I'd have yielded to him 4 weeks earlier, I wouldn't have been in that situation. But he allowed...
Which was probably bigger and worse.
Yes.
That would be my guess. And that's the reality of, I mean, even going back to our leadership thing, even if it's not your spouse, but we need a variety of thinkers in our organizations, because they're going to see problems differently. Have you ever seen that? It's it's not a meme, but it's like, picture a soup can, like a Campbell's soup can floating in a corner of a room.
Okay.
And picture two spotlights. So it's floating, and one spotlight is essentially shooting it from top to bottom, the shape on the wall, and you get a circle.
Right.
And then the other spotlight, 90 degrees, is shooting from the side angle, and you basically get a rectangle on the wall.
Yep.
And this has been one of my favorite illustrations of how, if the soup can is the problem, Fred seeing the circle and Elizabeth seeing the rectangle.
Exactly.
And we're arguing about the circle and the rectangle when really what's in the room is the soup can. And so if we are only seeing the circle, then we're gonna exacerbate problems down the road because we miss that there was a rectangle. In fact, we actually miss that there's a three-dimensional shape there. So I just, going back to your whole, like your opening premise about how we can sometimes as overachievers think that everything falls on us, that illustration points out that every Fred needs an Elizabeth and every Elizabeth needs a Fred.
Hands down. And the other principle that I would, just to pull out of that example that I was giving about Fred and I, is that there are times in the working relationship that you need to allow natural consequences to take their course in order for the person to come to the self-realization of the need for the other person, right? And what's funny is we can have fun about it. Like, we laugh about that example where, Fred, he'll make a funny comment about, so is this a hard drive situation? Or, oh my goodness. Like I said,
Fred does not lack a sense of humor.
No, he
does
not lack a sense of humor, but that's obviously a very good thing. So it took us about 18 months when he came home full time. It was literally about 18 months of, I would say ups and downs of emotional contention, disagreement on the direction that we want to go. And where we arrived and even continued to work the next 20 years was, what are our lanes? what are our strengths and how can we create a lane to be able to operate in our strengths? So we'll use the example of photography, the photography business. Fred is the camera guy. He says, we are a photo business. He is the photo. Elizabeth is the business. So if someone asks me about something related to a camera setting, I'm like, that's all Fred. Like, that's a Fred question. If someone asks Fred about a calendar question, he goes, oh no, you got to talk to Elizabeth about that. I don't touch the calendar. As a matter of fact, we've further refined it. He said he goes, I handle the C camera. She handles calendar and cash, right? Like anything money related, right? And so, but it's learning your lanes and being able to appreciate that, to your point, Fred needs an Elizabeth and Elizabeth needs Fred. And so it is so incredibly valuable. And even on my Go with Elizabeth side, I very much value Fred's perspective on my own business development, my brand development, because he knows me and he can give me great feedback as a result of it. So that, I know you asked me about how we did that. Those would be a couple of them. I don't know if you want to ask me a different question because I could give you more.
Well, what is coming to mind as I'm hearing this is you are now a coach. You're a many time author. You're obviously very involved. You've written Bible studies as well as business books, which is incredible breadth of work. And then you're very involved in the photography business. So to say you wear a few hats is an understatement. How did you grow into being able to do that seamlessly so things don't fall through the cracks, so that you can keep everything moving? Because one of the sayings I always come back to is it is challenging to chase multiple rabbits.
Correct.
And so how did you get essentially 4 businesses, maybe even more, and keep them all moving forward?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to say, because I absolutely do believe in that saying that you can't chase 2 rabbits and catch one. So I want to start there. That it goes back to my premise that it's important to understand one's strengths and operate within those strengths. So we'll take first that right now we pretty much have 2 businesses. We have Fred Shots Photography and we have my Go with Elizabeth business. Now, Go with Elizabeth umbrellas my authorship, my speaking, my coaching, my training, all of that comes under that business. Under the Fred Shots business, the photography side of that, what allows me to be able to be in both of those is that I'm operating within my strength zone within both of those. All right.
Okay.
So for example, on the Fred Shot side, I am, operationally, administratively, the training piece. So I interview photographers, editors. I set up all the onboarding for Fred to do all of that with them. I'm handling all the operations and the administrative pieces because that's my strength. It's exactly what I help clients do on the coaching side, or it might be something that I'm presenting on a training side where that is concerned. And my writing just gives me the ability to deep dive on topics that I'm going to end up presenting from stage or within an organization through training, or it comes up as a result of a coaching conversation. So they're very much interwoven, and they feed one another. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's an important piece is I've learned how do I operate within my strengths, because then I'm energized, I'm fueled, right, for my day-to-day piece of that. Go ahead. How did you learn to say no to things that weren't your strengths? How did you learn to say no to things that were crowding out your highest and best use, your gifts? That's a really good question, because I think we often are giving our yes to too many things. So then, and I do want to say that, Marjorie, you've known me for a number of years, and I used to have even more things I was doing, right? What I've tried to tell people is that Fred and I both, we have this desire to explore what does God want for us and our life, right? Where are our strengths? Where is it that we can make the biggest impact? That's very important to us. So we've been willing to try things. We had a DJ business. We sold that. We started the photography business. We've kept that. That's 25 years. We're in our 26th year of Fred Shots Photography. I started as a chemistry teacher. Then I moved to direct sales. Then from direct sales, I fully went all in on coaching and speaking. But all of that has been about discovering what is my best yes. So sometimes people, like my 23-year-old is still trying to figure out what his best yes is. Right?
I didn't know mine at 23 either. So.
Right? I thought I understood. I thought I was very clear on my best yes at 23. Yeah. I'm a chemistry teacher,
Spoken like an A type right there.
Exactly. Okay, so all that being said, part of it is I believe the way that you learn to give your best yes is you're willing to say yes to things and you learn from it, right? You go, that's not me. I'll give you an example. Fred and I, when we were looking at how do we want to serve in our church, this was back in the day, our children were, I think, 2 and fairly newborn, right? So in that frame, that set time frame, we were like, let's figure out where we want to serve. And so we volunteered. We said yes because they needed people to go into the nursery and like serve in the nursery. And so we sign up and we say, yes, we just let us try it. So we go in, we commit to a month. And by the fourth Sunday, we were like, this is not a good yes for us. We love our children. We are not called to care for, 6 babies in a room. Neither of us felt called that that's where we were supposed to be, right? So that's an example of what I'm talking about is that it's a matter of you have to say yes often enough to get experience. And then from your experience, you begin to take note of what are my best yeses. That's my first thing. My second thing is it is understanding what your strengths are. I have a strong strength as a global abstract thinker. I can see big picture. I can make connections very quickly. That gives me the ability to communicate well, to articulate well, to condense information well. So I start looking at that, for example, as a skill set, and then where is my best yes in using that skill set? Because that's going to energize me. And that's the other piece I would say. Our yeses need to be part of energizing us.
I love that because that was part of the journey I've been on over the last year is finding a way to, and that's actually the genesis of starting this. Having a podcast before podcast was a universal term was something I had dreamed about for 20 years. I actually started with a little dictaphone kind of thing.
Oh my word, I found my old one from a long time ago.
Yes. I think I still have, I think maybe I just got rid of the original because I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Goodwill. But I started interviewing people and imposter syndrome got in the way, and I've talked about that before. But the idea was when the idea circulated more recently, I got so much energy from it. I mean, just talking to people like you and all the previous guests, I always learn something. And to me, there's so much value in doing the things that give you energy, that come from a place of your strengths, that come from a place of your natural curiosities and inclinations. But what is so interesting is this saying yes versus saying no concept. Because a lot of leadership books will also, you got to say no more. And that's true too. But you also have to have come from a place of saying yes first to things to get really clear.
Agreed.
If you're a no person all your life, you're going to be limited, and if you're a yes person all your life, you're going to be limited. Once again, it's the dichotomy of the two of them.
You just made me think of something that I said earlier about overachievers and the high likelihood of them having midlife crisis. I think separate from overachieving, part of what leads to midlife crisis is they said no to something in the past that they get to a certain age and they go, I'm kind of bummed that I said no to that. And they start asking themselves, what would have happened in my life if I would have said yes to that? And then they start exploring the, well, what if I went in that direction? And now it creates this sense of discontentment with how I just spent the last 20 years, 30 years of my life. So I think what you just said is so important. It is a dichotomy between we've got to say yes enough to gain some experience and to learn, to determine what our strengths are. And yes, we'll need to say no. That's part of life. But if we're always saying no, how do we ever get to what is our best yes? And if we're always saying yes, we could be overrunning ourselves, and then we're just burnt out, which leads us to this unhealthy place of I say no to everything.
I love that. So we're always working to find the balance. One of the things I want to switch to, because you're one of the best people that I know at networking your businesses. Now, I know you have clients all over the country, but you and Fred you're very involved in your community.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about community building for business owners.
Hands down, it is such an important aspect of, yes, business building, but it's so important for people building as well. Like, it builds you individually, it's built us as a couple, but it's also important to find how you can contribute impactfully within your community. And the only way that you can really begin to identify that is to get out and network with other people. Not only does it help you gain perspective, because you're engaging with so many different businesses, so many different personalities, so many different approaches to how one markets said business in a networking environment, but it's also giving you the ability to be engaged with what's happening in the community. Case in point, yesterday, where we're positioned on the corner of an alleyway in a street, and our neighbor, where we're very good friends with her, she's a single mama, and Fred said to me, hey, her garage door, something's clearly wrong. You want to go over and see if she needs a connection to a garage door repair company. And so I go over, I actually have a conversation, they're kind of stuck inside the garage, but I texted with our neighbor, and I was like, hey, I got a great guy. His name is Dale. He owns ProLift garage doors. We network with him every week. He's awesome. And I even called ProLift because it's a franchise. And I said, hey, I want to make sure before I give this referral that you all serve our zip code. Because as a franchise, right, they have to be careful about that. Right. And the woman on the phone was like, oh, yes, we do serve that zip code. I was like, awesome. And so our neighbor, an hour or so later, she said, I have an appointment with that company tomorrow morning to take care of the garage door. So we were able to be that connector because we are networking with people, and it's so gratifying to be able to promote someone else's business, not blindly. I mean, people can go to Google and search garage door repair companies, but it's something to be said when your neighbor says, hey, I personally know the owner of this company, amazing guy, well-run company. If you need this, he's a great person to call.
We trust them.
Yes.
What do you think what do you think holds people back from networking, even getting started, or holds them back from doing so effectively?
First, what holds them back from getting started is oftentimes fear. That's fear of speaking in public, fear of I won't know what to say, fear it could be fear of success. Like if their systems have not been developed, in their mind they think, if I go to I mean, you and I both know, because you network, like a lot of times a new networker thinks, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get all this business and I'm not going to be able to handle
I can't even handle
That's
that.
right. I'm not going to be able to handle the business. But in reality, you go to networking and maybe you get business, maybe you don't. It could be months before you get business. Networking is a long range play on what it takes to build a business. So I think there's a lot of fear associated with it. In terms of doing it effectively, is some of it's the mindset. Someone comes into networking and they think, I once heard a lawn care person who was networking, had been there, he was on his third week, and he basically shamed all of us for not already doing business with him in his 30-second commercial. And then guess what? He didn't come back. And so the mindset of coming in, Fred calls it networking vampires. I want to come in.
Yes.
I want to see what I can sink my teeth in, where I can earn some quick money, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. And that's while you may get some business, it's not the effective way of networking.
Right. I think this plays into your yes, no from what we were just talking about too. I think you have to say enough yeses to networking to then ultimately be able to say no to becoming a professional visitor. Because I went through a phase many roles ago where at one point I was a professional visitor and I wasn't networking. If I was going wide, I wasn't going deep. And the crux of networking is about relationships, both giving and receiving. The best relationships have both. If you can't do that if you are in 30 different groups, 30 events a month. But if you don't try several, you also don't know, what's going to work for you.
Yes. When we first moved, because for the viewer, we uprooted our family from Tampa, Florida area, and we completely moved to the McKinney, Texas area where we now reside. That was 15 and a half years ago. We had no friends. We had no family. We restarted 2 businesses. Networking is how we did it. To your point, in the first week that I started networking, I went to 5 different groups. I paid attention to what is the dynamic of the room, how did I feel about the conversations that I was able to have in those moments, and what connections did I feel like could be strategic for me as well. And ultimately, of those 5 that I visited, initially, I joined 1, and I went all in on the 1. I was there every week. Within a year, I was on the committee helping to run the meeting, investing. The other thing, to your point about the ineffectiveness of a lot of people, is that they're not scheduling one-to-ones with people with whom they network.
Right.
That's the going deep. Like being at the meeting is like a wide net. Your people see you there, and that's valuable. But the one-to-one is the going deep. That's where I get to learn about Marjorie. What is Marjorie needing, wanting? What's your ideal client? How can I best connect you? Who's a strategic partner for you? That's the one-to-one meeting. And most people go to networking, they show up, they deliver a commercial, and they expect their phone to ring.
Right.
And that's not
and
the
it's
way it
funny you
works.
say that. I have a group that I actually do virtual. I know that there's, some people virtual doesn't work for. I do some in person, I do some virtual, but we do the one-on-ones. And I was talking to someone and I said, oh, you really need to connect with this other person. You might have missed him, but he's in the group at large. You need to connect. Well, he emailed me and said, they got connected and he was so grateful, but none of that would have happened without the one-on-one. So really it's about time, getting to know people.
Yes.
People say that other people buy from people they like. It's really people buy from people they trust. And because you can like someone surface level, but not really trust them. And so the one-on-ones and going deep and going consistently and all of that is what builds trust. And I'd also ask you to speak, how do you stay intentional? Because I have heard people complain about networking as I show up, but I never got business from it. So there has to be a way that we're intentional with how we present what our business does, with how you already mentioned one-on-ones. How do you stay intentional so it actually is an income producing activity without it feeling like you're just the vampire?
Yeah. That's another great question on the intentionality. So obviously one-to-ones is a way to be intentional, but having been networking now pretty much 50 weeks of the year for the last 15 years, the messaging actually is really, really important. And it's often where people, they don't even realize they're missing the mark. So it's like what they're saying, the person listening is thinking, I have no clue what this person does. Like I have no idea. And if I have no idea what you do, I don't even know that I can be intentional about a one-to-one with you, because I can't even
like you.
Exactly.
Right.
Like I think you're kind of a cool person. I like the way you dress, for example, but if I don't really have an understanding of exactly what you do, then I don't even know that I want to have a one-to-one with you, right? Like, is that the best yes for me where that is concerned? So the messaging is critically important. One of the things that Fred and I, if they ask us, or I should say when they ask us, we keep in our closet, because we learned this the hard way. Fred is the best example of poor messaging. When he started rebuilding Fred Shots here locally, he would always stand up basically and say, if you need a photo, call Fred Shots, right? It was very generic. It was about, I take photos. If you need a photo, then let me take your photo, right? I mean, it was just too generic. And, 6 months in, he's thinking, I'm going to quit because this is not working. And he recognized, I've got to do something different. And so on the way to networking one Wednesday, this was where he's battling in his mind. Do I stay? Do I quit? It was raining. Mm-hmm. And what came to his mind was this little jingle. And so that day at networking, rather than doing the commercial that he had been doing, he stood up and he did the jingle. Raindrops keep falling on my head. I need a headshot, so I think I'll call Fred. Do what he said. So raindrops keep falling on my head. They keep falling. Fred with Fred Shots, call me for a headshot. That very day, I kid you not, this is exactly how it happened. That very day, in the room, for the first and only time, an architecture firm had visited the meeting. And at 1:00 that afternoon, they called and said, hey, you were the guy that sang in the networking meeting, right? Like about headshots, because we need headshots. And I booked them for headshots. And from that point on, Fred became known as the Asian sensation because he rapped his commercials to music and also with photo examples. And all across the Metroplex, like just yesterday, I was in a coffee shop. And she's like, you're married to the Fred of Fred Shots, right? Because I'm like, yes, I am. And so he's known as the Asian sensation. Yes. For those of you watching, he is Asian. So, right. But that's an example. Messaging is so important. Is it memorable? Right? Do people understand what you do? And the thing is, this whole jack of all trades, master of none, right? It is about really zeroing in.
It is. And not everybody has to sing their jingle, but it does have to be both memorable and really describe what you can solve for people. I've even walked away from one-on-ones where I still didn't know what someone did. Yes. And again, I might like you, but it is really hard to connect you with someone if I can't understand how you're going to help someone I connect you with. And so there's got to be some of that. Elizabeth, I feel like I could just keep talking with you for hours because you obviously know, I think, the world of you. Last question. Yes. I'd love, you would definitely be someone, and why I wanted to interview you is you're absolutely relentless. You just always find a way to press forward in the face of difficulty and challenge, keep your head high, keep your integrity, look great doing it, and sound able to have difficult conversations, but they're honest ones. And I've always just admired that about you. What has given you that relentless spirit? What has inspired you? What has taught you that relentless spirit?
I would start first by saying, before I could give you the second thing that I'm going to say, is that I watched my father model relentlessness as that commercial fisherman entrepreneur of trying and learning, of trying and failing, and getting back up and going back at it with more information, with more knowledge to do it better. So I truly did get to observe him being relentless, and that very much got me into thinking as a relentless person. Like, you don't just give up. You find a way to make it work. I observed that in my father. He was not a quitter. And so that's where I would say it started. Second to that is, as I allowed my overachieving, just to bring this full circle, as I allowed my overachieving nature to really take hold of me, and my self-reliance of, right, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going. I'm willing to take the risk. But what that led me to is it being all about me, about my strength. What can I do? And that labeled me intimidating by a lot of people. And so as I began to really come face to face with, that's not how I want my life to go, that's where the second for me of relentlessness is God's work in my life. God really taking down the walls of pride, of ego, and I'm still a work in progress for sure, but recognizing that self-reliance will only go so far. It is not enough to actually win at the most important aspects of life. And so that's really my next thing. It's being in the Word of God. It's choosing to allow Scripture to give me the guidance that I need, to challenge me in the ways that I need to be challenged. And truthfully, my desire is to wake up every day and to work as unto the Lord and not for men. And when I'm working as unto the Lord and not for men, that will, as long as I have breath in this body, there's going to be the next thing that He's going to call me to do. And therefore, I need to be relentless in the pursuit of Him. And when I'm relentless in my pursuit of Him, then I can be relentless in what He gives me to accomplish.
I love that. Thank you so much. Share where people can find you, find the previous book, the new book, and all the things.
Awesome. Okay, so they can find me at my website, elizabethmahusay.com. I also love for people to
spell that in the chat.
Yes. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a great place. If you're a professional watching this, I drop a lot of great content there. So LinkedIn is also a great place for that. And I'm on Instagram as well. That's more personalized content. The books are all available on Amazon. Every single one of my books are on Amazon. The Red Book is currently in pre-order. It drops on July 14th. But I can give you the links for those as well to put in the show notes.
Put them all in the show notes. Thank you so much, Coach Elizabeth. It's been so fun.
Thanks so much, Marjorie.
Thank you for listening to Relentless Pursuit with Marjorie Dudley. If you want to build discipline, resilience, and results in your own work, that's what I help leaders and entrepreneurs do through coaching, speaking, and training. If today's conversation got you thinking about how you'd like to show up, you can find me through the links in the show notes. Until next time, stay relentless.